everyone, my name is Alli Aaronson, and today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about privilege. So, there's this strange phenomenon in our society that almost everyone seems to identify as middle class. To be middle class is to be socially acceptable. It means we will be neither pitied nor envied, and it means we are normal. For much of my life, I thought it was only on the high end of this normal. I'd gotten my definition of wealth from Gossip Girl and magazines, and my perspective was further skewed from my participation in competitive horseback riding. The girls I rode with had pools and beach houses and private school educations. Once, on a horse trial trip with a bunch of girls looking to buy a new horse, one of my friends commented on her budget, exclaiming, $50,000? My mom is cheap. I was half horrified and half captivated. I worked at the farm to pay for horse shows. I didn't have the $300 helmet with the fashionable logo on the front. I thought I couldn't compete with a $50,000 horse. I wanted that. I wanted my family to follow me around the country and stay in expensive hotels while I competed in Florida and California. I wanted a horse flown in from Germany and a saddle from France. I wanted that. Sort of. While I lusted after the luxuries that my riding peers enjoyed, I knew that my wealth was abnormally high at school. I attended an extremely diverse public high school, and I was inexplicably ashamed to find myself at the higher end of the financial spectrum. Questions of, I like your dress, where'd you get it, provoked enormous anxiety. I got it as a gift, I'd squeak, or I can't remember. I couldn't figure out why, but I felt ashamed, guilty. I hated discussing slavery in school. It was the one issue in which I couldn't convince myself that I was the victim. But I was a slave too. Despite my lack of religious belief, I clung to my Jewish heritage as a barrier to guilt. I played up the hardships of being a woman and a Jew, desperately trying to convince myself that it wasn't all easy. I thought my life was hard because I didn't celebrate Christmas. One year, when I was feeling particularly down about being left out of the festivities, my parents decided to do something fun. So we went to the Four Seasons for Christmas. Let me repeat. I went to the Four Seasons instead of celebrating Christmas. Poor me. I couldn't think of anything to wish for, and that is ridiculous. I hope that living and working with people whose lives are dramatically different from mine will help me end the cycle of finding new things to want, and will enable me to better understand how we can more effectively work to lessen economic inequality. On TBB, I went deeper in understanding my place in the world financially. Although I was living in a shack with cockroaches and showering with a bucket in Ecuador, I couldn't escape my economic status. My bag of clothes, my weekly trips to the Santo Domingo grocery store, my malaria pills, these things were not a part of my host family's life. In China, my privilege followed me through the color of my skin. We were the first white people our families had seen off of the TV, and they were enthralled by us. He says you are very beautiful, my host sister giggled every time she introduced me to someone. At first I was flattered, but as the compliments continued, I became troubled. White skin is extremely valued in Chinese society, and my mom never wanted me to do work on the farm, for fear the sun would darken my skin. It seemed like all of these people who were older and wiser than me felt inferior to me, and I wanted them to know that it was the other way around, that I was learning from them. I never really thought about white privilege, but it was then that I realized that the color of my skin guarded my acceptance into almost any society. In China, I also gained greater understanding of my privilege as an American when we watched the History Channel on TV, and I realized that I knew things about Chinese history that my sisters didn't, as my information wasn't subject to censorship. I mentioned earlier that I'd often cited the subjugation of women as a hardship that I faced. While being female undoubtedly presents some challenges in the United States, it is nothing in comparison to what women in India face. Just 7 weeks of the repressive society left me feeling stifled. Every time I left my homestay, I was met with disturbing stares and frequent catcalls. I was scared to do anything by myself, and when I did walk around alone, I walked quickly and tensely, breathing a sigh of relief when I reached my destination safely. I once asked some of my female students to tell me about the difference between a girl and a boy. My 16-year-old student, Gori, responded, "Boys can go out, but if we go out, bad things will happen to us." These girls were limited even in their physical mobility. Dowry tradition creates a huge financial incentive to have no children, and many families have resorted to sex-selective abortions or child abandonment. The dichotomy between my life and my Indian counterparts left me asking, why me? Why was I born to two loving parents in a big house with a good education and a world of opportunities? Why wasn't I dumped in a garbage can? Why wasn't I born in a slum? How did it come to be that some children are born HIV positive, while I was born with perfect health? What did I do to deserve this? I know I'm not the only one who has struggled with this question. Societies all across the world have come up with excuses as to why some are better off than others. Hindus believe in karma, that people who were good in their past life are being rewarded for their decency in their current life. During colonialism, Europeans believed that they were more fully human than those they enslaved. The fact that we as a society have come up with answers for this question of why me shows that we are inherently uncomfortable with the disparities in people's standards of living. Do we think we are smarter, harder working? Are our lives more valuable because we are privileged? I instantly regret the thought. But I can't deny that our society seems to treat the thousands of deaths occurring in the developing world as less tragic than the loss of a few people in the Western world. Do we view them as less human? Is it that we think they are conditioned to suffering? I have met these people throughout this year, and I know that their suffering is just as tragic as my own, that they are just as human and more hardworking, and most likely wiser than I am. So why me? When some children don't have pants to wear to school in the winter, why do I spend $300 on a prom dress? When some HIV patients don't have enough food to take their medication, why do I buy $4 raspberries? We laugh at the lifestyles of celebrities and socialites, but aren't our lifestyles also exorbitant? I am a self-proclaimed food snob, and I often beg my parents to take me to fancy restaurants. I love the food, the presentation, love the luxury. The beautiful bathrooms, the stool for my purse, the perfectly folded napkin, these are great things. But after the meal, when I'm so full I can barely walk, I'm always left with this nagging feeling that it was ridiculous, that there are so many better uses for that money. I once went to a restaurant that cost $275 a person. One of my patients in South Africa needed $40 to send her kids to school. Seems pretty clear that this wasn't the best use of money. But it's not so easy to write off every luxury that money can buy. What about my horse? He could have sent hundreds of children to school, but horseback riding gave me a hobby, taught me responsibility and dedication, and greatly enriched my life. Moreover, what about TBB? TBB was immensely expensive, but it was also immensely life-changing. Was it worth it? I often console myself with the argument that it's okay, as long as I'm grateful. As long as I still regard it as special and don't come to expect such extravagances, I'm not being ridiculous. But shouldn't this also apply to my overpriced chai latte? A drink from Starbucks would be viewed as an extreme extravagance for most of the world. But as a sleep-deprived city girl, I've come to see it as a necessity. When we were studying sustainable agriculture in China, we read Gandhi's book, India of My Dreams, in which he advocates what he terms a nonviolent economy, in which people take only as much as they need. Honestly, this concept was initially scary to me, because I know that would leave me with a lot less than I have now. Do I need more because I'm used to it? That seems wrong, but I don't know if I'm capable of the selflessness required for a nonviolent economy. Is it good enough to give some, but keep enough to maintain a somewhat opulent lifestyle? These questions crop up a lot for me when I think about my future career. I used to say that I'd be content to just maintain the lifestyle that I've grown up with, but that was before I came to realize that my lifestyle isn't normal. Over the course of this program, I felt increasingly inspired to dedicate my life to poverty alleviation, but I've struggled with the realization that to truly dedicate my life to helping people, I must be willing to sacrifice my finances. While it is possible to make money in development work, I've seen that these positions often mean working in large NGOs, operating under self-interest. If I'm going to commit myself to this, I think I must do it all the way. However, I worry that I'll be sucked into this corrupt yet glamorous side of development. It strikes me as sad that I have this low expectation for myself. Why do we accept the power that money holds over us? I've struggled a lot with locating myself on the spectrum between living for myself and living for the world. I found that I'll never be content with myself if I'm not working for the world, and so I've decided to prioritize my passion over my lifestyle. I cannot come up with an answer to the question of why me, but I do know that I must be part of the solution. With privilege comes power, and I have an obligation to use it. In China, I was spoken about a lot, and I never had any idea what was being said about me. All I know is that I often heard Alli and Obama separated by only a few words. At the time, I found this ridiculous. I don't have any connection to Obama. I haven't even gone to college yet. When I really think about it, though, Obama and I aren't very far apart. As part of my American privilege, I get to vote, to speak out, to access almost all of the information that Obama has. I even got to discuss my ideas in person with legislative staff a few weeks ago. That is power. Next year I will be going to college, which is more education than most of the world dreams of. I will have access to information, grants, and well-connected people. And I can use that to further investigate why these inequalities exist and what can be done to equalize them. That is power. Without changing what they have to say, I can become a voice for the voiceless and empower them to use their own voice. That is power. I think a side effect of being Jewish is that I have a victim's mentality. I see myself as the slave, the Rwandan, the Darfurian, but I've realized that my perspective is misplaced. In Cambodia, we visited the killing fields, the site of Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge's attack on intellectuals and other opponents of his version of the Great Society. As usual, my first thought was, intellectuals? It could have been me. But as I learned more about the genocide, I realized that as an American, I was on the other side. First of all, the war in Vietnam put economic strains on Cambodia that provoked such instability and scapegoatism. Moreover, the UN, and therefore the US, recognized Pol Pot's regime despite the knowledge of the terrors he was committing. At the end of the audio guide, the speaker discussed some other genocides, including that of Native Americans in the United States. I was shocked. I'd never heard the actions taken against Native Americans described as genocide before, but I was even more disturbed that I hadn't realized the extent of America's actions. I was so bent on seeing myself as a victim, and America as a victim's escape, that I was blind to our role as oppressors. In India, we did an activity in which we were asked to place ourselves on a spectrum between oppressed and oppressors. At first, I followed my ingrained instincts and identified myself as oppressed. But as I thought more about it, I felt I had more in common with the oppressors. I cannot buy clothing, coffee, food, or pretty much anything without affecting someone. By existing in society, I am complacent with sweatshops, unfair labor practices, environmental degradation, and a host of other atrocities. I think this is why we feel so uncomfortable when we discuss wealth. Our guilt about our privilege is more than just a lack of understanding of our luck. It is the realization that we are rich because others are poor. I hate to say it out loud. It hurts to admit it. But I think that if we are ever going to truly help sort out the mess of the world, we must be honest in our role in creating it. We depend on poverty. Our society runs on oil, whose extraction has created environmental toll that destroyed agrarian economies. That's us. We complain about illegal immigration, and yet we destroyed Mexico's economy by artificially reducing our corn prices. That's us. We fear the HIV epidemic, but it was fueled in South Africa by rules made by the privileged. During apartheid, people were only allowed to live in certain areas if they held a job there, so mining men were unable to bring their families with them, setting them up for infidelity and spreading the disease. That's us. And development. Development, which is all too similar to colonization, in which we give nations money so that they will buy our products and export their raw materials. Development, which has done more harm than good. That is us too. Some development theorists have philosophized that if we stopped trying to help the poor and just got out of their way, we'd end up doing more good. We don't do that, though, because it doesn't look as philanthropic, but more so because it's harder. To get out of their way, we'd have to completely overhaul our society. To break our dependence on poverty, we must break our dependence on dirty energy and underpaid labor. And to do that, we have to act out of our economic best interests. So now I have an even larger decision to make. Not only must I choose to dedicate my life to helping people and abandon financial incentives, but I must work outside of my own best interests. It is not possible for everyone to live with the high material standards that I am used to. And so an equalization of society must mean that I am coming down. It means that I am voting to tax myself a lot, that I'm pushing for a healthcare system in which I'm paying for more than myself. It means the current system of educational funding is inadequate, as funding comes from housing taxes, so funding varies according to the economic status of the district. But a change means that my district, which has a lot of property taxes to draw from, is going to take a cut. If I truly want to do good, that has to be okay. Recently, I've thought a lot about the place of self-interest in development. In DC, I became frustrated with large multilateral institutions like the World Bank, which were acting more like corporations than development agencies. I wanted them to have a place in development because they can contribute huge sums of money, but it seems that if any self-interest is involved, it will result in indebting other nations and using the money to create markets for ourselves. We cannot continue this fake aid. If we're truly going to make a difference, the development community is going to have to abandon its ulterior motives. Can we abandon our self-interest? I don't know. All I know is I don't want to be a slave to privilege. Education theorist Paulo Freire argues, dehumanization marks those whose humanity has been stolen and those who have stolen it. I believe myself to be an unintentional thief of humanity. But what will I do with this information? Should we harness our guilt and use it? Is it acceptable that part of my motivation is to redeem myself? Or is that dangerous? If we are doing this to alleviate our shame, then we are acting in self-interest, just as we would be if we were trying to profit from development. But maybe we can use it. We often deem guilt to be a useless emotion, as we associate it with feelings on past actions that we can no longer address. Although it is uncomfortable, I think there is value in addressing our guilt. Guilt without agency is unproductive, but empowered guilt, we can use that. If we don't feel helpless in addressing the causes of our guilt, it can increase our responsibility, and therefore our action. As long as I am truly helping people, and not merely pretending to, I think my work will be productive. So I'm privileged. And I'm privileged because others aren't. And I feel guilty about that because I know and love and care about these people. And I can use these things. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to redefine the difference between needs and wants? To change my lifestyle so that others can have a bit of what I have? To not turn away from the horrors I prefer not to see? To employ my guilt? Is it worth it to choose what is right over what is easy? I think it's worth it to try. Thank you very much. Guys, so now we have questions. So, does anyone have a question for me? Yeah.
Oh, last one. By the way, I thought that was fast. You use a few interesting terms, you said like empowering guilt and things, and I think that's kind of an interesting way to put it, because it's sort of a trade-off where, because you feel guilty about having or being rich, you don't say, well, then I should choose to be poor, and that's not really what you're saying. I think the problem is, how you go and use it, and if you can be productive and innovative and not have malinvestment or, where the money is going kind of into, you use it for education so people can into middle class society or whatever, it can actually make, you eliminate poverty that way. So I think. Yeah, you're going to, not just be guilty, but do something about the guilt to improve education and productivity would you think that's a good characterization?
Yeah, definitely. I'm not saying we should all go out and join them in the slums and we have to give up everything our way of life. I'm just saying that we can't be creating those slums, and right now we are. And I don't know if anyone was at Kate's presentation, but in the question and answer, she talked a little bit about how we can vote with our dollars and we can make choices in that way that aren't necessarily, it's not like we're deciding to be poor, but we can live in a way that's not hurting anyone else, or move to that at least. Yeah.
So I heard you ask a lot of great questions. I was particularly glad to hear you ask what is development in the middle of that. But I absolutely loved the way you shared your journey with us. And that's what it sounded like, was this journey that you've been on. From before TV until this moment. So as you think about going back home, and you think about arriving on campus in the fall, what are the burning questions for you right now? What drives you forward in terms of, okay, here's where I am today, and this is the stuff I need to know about that I'm really passionate about knowing.
My burning questions. I have so many. I think one thing that really worries me is I talked a little bit about that I don't want my motivation in my career to be making money. At the same time, to make choices that aren't going to hurt people, those things often cost more money. Sustainable food, clothing, that's fair trade. And I struggle with how will I balance those two things? How will I reflect in my lifestyle sustainable practices while at the same time devoting my life to it? I guess, so many burning questions. When we were in our meetings in Washington, D.C., we went to one meeting that was called, the organization was Global Financial Integrity, I think, and they talked about how much money is lost to offshore investing, and how if we had that money, gosh, wouldn't we be able to do great things with it? And so I really want to learn more about, I guess, how economically we could restructure our system to protect impoverished people more, and many more, but. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.